When it comes to a series which derives its name from the protagonist, like the Rance series does, you'd imagine that the first character people would meet, or at least see, is the titular protagonists themselves. But, strangely enough, for those who started the Rance series 30 plus years ago, they would find that the first character they actually met was someone who technically didn't exist yet. That being the swords-dancing, song-singing Shopkeep, and cover girl for Rance 1 who didn't actually appear in the game, Tomato Purée, a character who I find infinitely fascinating, as her history is nearly as strange as she is herself. Tomato Purée is a minor character in the Rance series, appearing in-game for the first time as a Shopkeep in Rance 2, and finally as a playable character in Rance 8, also referred to as Quest, though she's been in the series since the first game, being front and center on a cover of a game she didn't even appear in. And in the universe of the Rance series, she's also a rather strange individual, being oddly blunt and childish at times. Alongside this, she has an obsession with certain monsters, to the point of either collecting and even humorously mimicking them. Though, before we discuss her history in the series, let's try to understand the meaning behind her name and design. Now I know what you're thinking. Tomato Purée is a rather strange name. So strange in fact that it actually had me stumped as to what it could possibly mean. So in order to get my answers, I needed to make a perilous journey across the continent. So I booked a flight to the free city of Zio, and in my travels I encountered many a dangerous threats. All so that I could arrive at the Alisoft building and ask the Handy King himself about her name, and this is what he told me. Why is Tomato named Tomato Purée?
I liked how it sounded. Food, animals, things I like. These are the foundations for the names of the characters.
So yeah, Tomato Purée's name is in reference to the food, chosen because it's a funny name. And while it is a simple answer, it's actually called into attention in the game itself, as in Rance 2, when Rance asks Tomato her name, once she tells him, he can't help himself but to laugh at her, making her a little upset. So much so that if you ask her name too many times, she gives you a more ridiculous name instead, causing Rance to stop laughing. Now, design-wise, Tomato Purée has had a couple looks throughout the series, starting first with her first shopkeeper design, which was originally just a long purple robe with a gem in the middle of it, likely to play into the series' own sort of generic fantasy setting at the time of Rance 2, by making her appear like your average RPG shopkeeper. Though, in the remakes of Rance 2, titled Rance 2, Tomato was given an overhaul in her design, giving her now a yellow robe with a more apron-like design on the front of it, likely having her mimic the appearance of a standard Japanese convenience store employee, which now was playing into the series' own adopted identity of a pseudo-modern fantasy aesthetic. And being a shopkeep is one of Tomato's major traits, as it's a practice that she takes a lot of pride in, even considering herself to be a pioneer of the item shop scene. Which is true in a sense, both meta-wise, where she was the first multi-purpose shop in the Rance series, selling equipment, weapons, and items, versus Rance 1, where there were multiple shops for each individual thing. But also in universe, she was seemingly the first shop in all of custom until the curse of the town was lifted and more industrial shops started coming in. Though being a shopkeeper isn't her only passion, as Tomato mentions in her conversations with Rance that she essentially wanted to become an idol-like bard, someone who would travel the world and sing the praises of a legendary hero. And it's likely, in a better world, she would have been singing songs about the world's actual hero, Arios the Omen. But, given his own inactivity, she likely never met him, which is rather strange, as not only was he in custom at the time of Rance 2, he was even sent there on the same mission as Rance, and was even doing everyone's side quests in the town. But given that Tomato mistakes Rance for the hero, this means that Arios never visited the item shop in custom, meaning that him never showing up likely never gave her the inspiration to go and follow that dream, and when Rance suggests that she just takes up singing songs about him, she turns down his offer, saying that if she did that, her shows would all have to be 18+. Though, after the events of Rance 2, Tomato would go out to try to achieve her dream. But in doing so, she would have to undertake a job change. She was now a licensed adventurer like Rance, seemingly in reference to the Bard class in most tabletop RPGs, as Tomato has taken up singing while she travels and fights. And though while I say her dream drove her to this, it was also in part due to her love for an insect-type monster called a mimic. as before the events of Rance 2, Tomato would adopt a baby mimic that she calls Mimi, which she took in because she found a passion for caring for monsters after she successfully raised an award-winning bonsai creature. Bonsai creatures being these small little multi-headed snake plants that assumedly grow into actual bonsai trees, that seemingly, when they are matured, also gain a teleportation-like ability that is later then repurposed when the tree is dead into small single-use pieces of teleportation wood. Don't ask, the series is just kinda weird like that. But anyways, raising the mimic gave Tomato a newfound appreciation for treasure chests as well, and this is in part due to her own skill levels in Fortune, as she has Fortune level 1. Now, Fortune level 1 is a skill level that grants the person born with it luck in their daily lives, though the type of luck is very vague and hard to determine. So there isn't an exact science to how the skill functions, but a way of putting it in simpler terms is those who possess the skill level are favored by circumstance in unpredictable ways. This can be seen as both a blessing or a curse, but in rather extreme situations, luck tends to not be a factor, so you still need to be skilled in some way to make up for it. And for Tomato, her level 1 in Fortune essentially made her a good gacha roller. Imagine those people who pick up a gacha game for the first time and roll that 5-star that nobody can get, which means that the chests that she would stumble upon tended to provide her great gifts for her shop. And this infatuation with treasure chests and mimics and how she would often find them had her sort of playing Mimic in a way, where she would climb inside empty treasure chests and pop out at adventurers who pass by. Also, strangely enough, Tomato might be the whole reason that Mimics are an enemy type in the remake games at all, as they hadn't existed in the series before or after, only in 2 remake games and Rance 2, where they were special NPCs. Though, outside of her idol and Mimic-related dreams, she also wanted to travel the world to visit other countries' item shops and compare their selection to her own. Along with this, she wanted to enter other nations' dungeons to find items to fill her own shop with, and also promote her own shop. She actually reminds me a bit of the game Racketeer. Also, with her job change came a new outfit, this being the famous bikini armor which was seen on the cover of Rance 1, a design which likely went on to influence the armor for future characters in the series like the Liasis Royal Guards and Millie York. Also, given both Millie and Tomato come from the same place and are roughly the same type of adventurer, this might imply that the armor seen is the standard female armor of custom adventurers. Though, since we're discussing Tomato's adventure design, I think it would be good to point out this really weird detail about her that I've seen in all art about Tomato. Be it celebratory, conceptual, or even promotional, all official art of Tomato depicts her with a specific looking sword design, this being a long sword with a rounded base and a hilt that curves upwards. The design of this weapon stands out as rather unique looking, and that's because the sword does have a specific owner. It's Rance's sword, or at least it was, as we see him with it in multiple scenes during Rance 2, and it's even on the cover of Rance 3 with him holding it. Though, from Rance 3 onwards, he acquires a sentient demon-killing sword called Chaos, and his standard longsword changes in design to look like a more normal longsword with either a gem or an R carved into it. This design change gets retconned into the previous titles, with Rance 01, 02, and 03 introducing their new canon, meaning that the rounded blade design no longer exists in universe. Except for, in the special edition copies of Rance 01, we actually see the original Rance 1 cover remade with Tomato posing with the same sword, both in an updated art style by the new series artist, Orion, implying that Tomato is now the owner of this sword, which is even weirder because according to Rance Quest, the only game where Tomato is playable, Tomato can't even use swords!
Tomato's stats are lower than average, with strength comparable to the game's Spellblades, and a weak constitution. Additionally, she has an incomplete weapon pool, consisting only of hammers and spears. If you've been paying attention though, Tomato's known skill level is Fortune, which is represented in-game through her 5 unique passives. Liked by treasure chests increases the amount of treasure chests that spawn when changing maps. And Liked by Treasure Chests 2 increases the encounter rate for the Treasure Dongo monster, which, while it's not a mimic per se, does fit with her affinity for chesty insects. These skills synergize well with her other set of passives, Weapon and Armor Lover, Special Item Lover, and Item Lover, which increases the chances of receiving those categories of items from chests and drops. Though you can only benefit from the effects of one at a time, if you are seeking out specific items, a team consisting of Tomato, Mirim, and a few utility rangers or civilians is a strong way to go about it. While custom characters can buy their way into her item pool manipulating passives, Tomato is irreplaceable in the pursuit of treasure. Personally, I prioritize the liked by treasure chest skills, and pick up weapon and armor lover and the special item lover passives later down the line. Because of how stats for items are generated, item lover generally comes off as a lower priority. With the remaining points, I go for hammers over spears, as the AoE impulse skills should let her sweep weaker monsters you happen to encounter. Though, if you choose spears, you can slide her into the back row and bring more offensive powerhouses for your front row. My back row is usually occupied by utility rangers or utility civilians when I'm going to Tomato Town, though. Tomato's recruitment also has the benefit of not requiring investment on the player's half. With her level cap of 37, you can get right into Moruing her to boost her level cap and bring her into your main party. When having her absorb items, picking accuracy, strength, or stun is good if you're choosing to have her use hammers like me, or if keeping your tomato from going splat is an issue for you, you can build her defensively with HP as a priority.
Though you may ask yourself, Tomato being this girl with a decently high level cap of 37, which, side note, actually makes her the third most capable person from her entire hometown, meaning hypothetically Tomato is stronger than 5/7 of the notable people to come from custom. But along with this, she is a pioneer of business and a decent adventurer to boot, yet she isn't really on Rance's radar, and this is because, both, she doesn't really want to be on that radar, as most of her interactions with him is her turning him down or telling him off, and that's because in one of their only intimate interactions, Tomato describes herself as frigid or passionless. Essentially, she doesn't feel any form of sexual arousal, and this is due to a briefly hinted at, but never delved into deeply, abuse in her youth, which, and call it death of the author all you want, might actually explain a good namesake for her, as Tomato Puree's name was always odd to me because of her green hair and green eyes. It didn't really match up with the initial idea of a tomato, let alone tomato puree, though her color palette does work if we're talking about an unripe tomato, as they are naturally green before a chemical process turns them red. And due to Tomato's trauma, she can be seen as being forced to mature before she was naturally ready to, which also partly explains her kind of odd personality, shifting between this childish drama queen and actual professional adult. These shifting personality traits could be in a way her coping mechanism to deal with her day-to-day life. But it would also seem a portion of her personality and design is in direct reference to Pinocco from the Black Jack manga series, as Pinocco is a homunculus created from a teratuma or a non-fully developed parasitical twin sibling that Jack saved by creating an artificial body for them. This body was small like a child due to their underdeveloped parts by being a teratuma, and because of this, she is constantly shifting in personalities, as while she is technically 18, Jack considers her to be more around 0 years old. Even so, she still works hard as both his assistant and housemaid, while also partaking in more adult activities such as drinking and gambling. But she isn't immune to acting immature for comedy, be it either crying when she's hurt, throwing a tantrum, reading childish stories, or just playing around with childish toys. And due to Pinocchio's more comic relief role in the story, she's also famous for inventing a more nonsensical phrase, often translated as, "ah my goodness," spelled specifically like this, which is a phrase Tomato directly uses in Japanese, and funny enough, even gets translated the same way. Honestly, a lot of Tomato's comedy is very similar to that of Pinocchio's. But her life is a bit of the reverse, minus the homunculus part, at least as far as we know. She is more of a child living in an adult's body due to her trauma. And after Quest, Tomato doesn't actually return to the series, not appearing in 9 or 10, meaning that her ending that we get in Quest is the rest of her life in the series, and it's pretty good, as she continues her adventure in search of something called the Legendary Mimic, though sadly she never finds it, but she does eventually return to her shop in Custom and finds the hustle and bustle of clerk life more peaceful than traveling and adventuring. She eventually decides to settle down and become a merchant again, going on to sell her adventuring loot to the next generation of heroes, which is a surprisingly peaceful ending for such a strange character. Though still, one of the strangest facts about her life actually comes from her role as the cover girl of Rance 1, as when Rance 1 originally released, the art created for the cover didn't actually have a character specifically in mind. though if you ask me, it's possible that the cover girl of Rance 1 was originally supposed to be Pulp Tank's Flanders, one of the girls that Rance saves during his mission in the first game, who also falls in love with him, which would explain why she'd be posing up with his sword. But anyway, as the story goes, in 2003, during an interview with Alisoft, Tori, the lead writer for the Rance series at the time, confirmed that Tomato was indeed the cover girl of Rance 1, which came as a shock to the series' new artist, Orion, who not only disliked the decision, but claimed that the only thing that the two shared was their green hair. But Yukimi, the main artist at the time who drew the cover, doubled down on Tori's claim, making it confirmed that Tomato was indeed the girl on the cover of Rance 1, and technically the first character anyone ever met. And honestly, this history is all too fitting for the girl. She is a perfect representation of the Rance series as a whole, and how wacky it can get. From her odd obsessions to her strange gimmicks, such as ending all of her sentences with question marks in Rance 2 Kai. I still don't get that one. Tomato Purée is a character I find as infinitely fascinating as I find the Rance series itself, and the more I learn about her, the more I want to unpack, and the more I want to share. And I hope this video helps shine some light on this oddball of a character. I also kind of find it funny that in a way, with her being the cover girl for Rance 1, a game that she doesn't appear in, it can be kind of seen in a way as her telling the story of that game. You know, just like Rance suggested that she should. And with that all said and done, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more videos like this in the future, you can support me over at Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want to experience the same fortune that Tomato does when she opens chests, well, you can get that same experience by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimonetta.com.